Facebook is under fresh scrutiny on Parliament Hill. MPs want to know what the platform is doing to protect Canada from election interference, especially after revelations of unauthorized data mining by Cambridge Analytica. Well, today, the Federal Privacy Commissioner testified before a Commons committee, and our colleague, the CBC's Katie Simpson, was watching all that and joins us now. Katie, what did you hear?
Well, the Privacy Commissioner wants new power, and although that's not necessarily something new, there is certainly new pressure on the government to do something in light of the ongoing fallout from the Facebook data scandal. Daniel Thériault was testifying before a parliamentary committee today, and he wants to be able to monitor or have access to or have an understanding of how political parties in Canada are using personal sensitive data of Canadians. Right now in Canada, there are absolutely zero regulations about how these parties can operate when it comes to data. The way the system works right now is parties set their own rules, and there's no checks and balances to see if they're actually living up to their standards. So Thériault says that is a problem. He spoke with reporters outside of the committee after, and he says he wants that to change, but also he wants a major overhaul of Canada's privacy laws to make them stronger. He realizes that might not happen in the short term, but he is looking for those changes on the whole.
So the ideal would be comprehensive, but comprehensive may be too late. If the government is to focus on what is achievable before the election, I would say to ensure that political parties are governed by privacy legislation, and give my office certain powers to inspect and make orders when we find that violations occur. So these would be essentially the two main things that should be done.
So the Privacy Commissioner is bringing new urgency to this because of what's gone on with Facebook. Of course, Facebook has apologized for not doing enough to protect its users' data. More than 87 million users, with that data being picked up by some analytic firms, with the allegation that they were trying to influence the U.S. election as well as the Brexit vote. So all of that attention is putting new pressure on the government, and certainly the Privacy Commissioner is trying to take advantage of that and really get his point across that he needs more powers and he needs it now.
So new pressure on the government. What are the parties saying about all this today?
Well, there seems to be a mild showing of consensus here, which is something that doesn't necessarily often happen in politics at this level. We spoke with the Liberals, the NDP, and the Conservatives, all members of this committee today. The Liberals were open to having a conversation about it, but they weren't very firm in terms of offering up any sort of concrete promises. The NDP acknowledged this, the way that data can be manipulated. There needs to be a conversation about how political parties use data and how it's monitored. And the Conservatives, too. The MP, Peter Kent, he said that, there needs to be a conversation about this. We know that there are foreign actors out there that want to influence elections around the world, whether it be Canada or elsewhere, and that the Canadians need to be aware of what is going on. So there seems to be at least a consensus that there needs to be a conversation around this. Whether the Privacy Commissioner gets what he wants, gets new powers, and is able to take a look at what these parties are doing in secret, that's a whole different question.
Indeed it is. Thanks as always, Katie Simpson in Ottawa.
Thank you.
To delve further into the privacy concerns surrounding Facebook, let's bring in Ann Kavoukian. She's the distinguished expert in residence leading the Privacy by Design Center of Excellence at Ryerson University. Nice to see you.
Pleasure.
One of the things that really jumped out at me when Thériault was talking before the committee today, he said, and this is a quote, "Our personal information is at risk because the legal framework is insufficient." What do you say to that?
He's absolutely right. There's a new law that's coming into effect in the European Union at the end of May called the General Data Protection Regulation, which dramatically raises the bar on privacy and embeds for the first time privacy by design, something I developed here in Canada,
right.
and it's now part of this law. Our laws do not have that. So our laws will no longer be considered to be adequate with the strengthened laws of the European Union. Why should we be falling behind?
What do you hope comes from a committee like this? You know, it's getting a lot of play, but we see these committees come and go and nothing really happens. What would you like to see actually happen from this?
I want some action out of this committee because there's enormous pressure for us to raise our privacy laws by the end of May so that we will have this essential equivalence with the GDPR. And we've always enjoyed it in the past. It's not the first time that we would have been departing from them. It will be the first time. So unlike the US, we've always had a wonderful relationship with the EU. Our laws have been as strong as theirs. No longer. We can't stand by that.
One of the things that really, you know, in watching the U.S. hearings last week, the week before, was the illiteracy around digital issues among politicians. You're the, what, 3-time privacy commissioner in Ontario. How do you tackle that illiteracy? Because the fact is the politicians that will make these rules, most cases, they simply don't know what they're talking about.
You know what I would do? I would keep it really simple. I would say privacy is all about control, personal control on the part of the individual to control the uses and the sharing of his or her personal information. This is reflected in the new law in the GDPR. It should be reflected in our laws. And when you start with that, it changes the model to a model of positive consent, meaning you collect my information for a particular purpose. It's called the primary purpose of the data collection. Then you, government or private sector entity, you may only use it for that particular purpose. And that's it. That's what's called privacy as the default setting. You automatically get privacy.
Tarian's other big line that jumped out at me was he was trying to point out that there's a big and important difference between encouraging a company to do the right thing and then doing what's necessary as the state. Do you think the political actors in this understand the urgency with which they need to act? And if it's, as Tarian seems to indicate, a legislative hammer that needs to come down, that's on them?
You know why I think it's important to do that is I really believe in using the carrot. I think that's far preferable. But when I was privacy commissioner, I always had the stick. I had order-making power. If I found a particular organization had breached the legislation, then I could order them to change their practices, etc. Since they knew I had that power, I had a much better relationship with them in terms of negotiating and doing things that would favor them to begin with. So I think it's really important for Commissioner Tallien to get the powers he needs and hopefully not have to use them.
We talk a lot about Facebook in this. They are not the only ones, though.
They're not the only ones, but it is appalling what they have gotten away with over the years. In 2009, our federal privacy commissioner had a decision against them, and they agreed to ensure that their users would be able to have their privacy protected. In 2011, in the U.S., with the Federal Trade Commission, very strong consent decree. Again, the same thing. We will ensure that users will be able to control the uses of their data. They didn't do any of that.
Right. But, like, I mean, we stumble from crisis to crisis. That right now we're all focused on Facebook and we'll maybe do something about that in particular. The next one will be, I mean, Google has your emails and your mapping. Amazon has your search history of your, you know, your shopping history. These companies have been built up and they are giant empires now that are built on our data.
You're absolutely right, and that's all going to change at the end of May. Call me the eternal optimist.
You're that optimistic. You think this is our window.
I've been doing this a long time. Between the wake-up call that this Facebook debacle has been and this unbelievably new, strong privacy law coming into effect in the EU, the GDPR, which raises the bar dramatically. It changes the model from negative consent, a person having to opt out to get their privacy. It changes it to a positive model of positive consent. Privacy as the default means you automatically get privacy.
And then how many people are just going to click on it and say, I don't care, I want to take the stupid quiz?
It's not going to be that simple. You see, they're not going to have to go through that. What they will not be able to be told, oh, we're going to do whatever we want with your information, just click here, you can't use it. It's going to be a completely different model where they're going to have to respect people's privacy as the default setting. It's night and day change.
Let's set the date. June 1st, you come back and we'll see what actually happened and where we stand. I'm looking forward to it.
Likewise.
Anne Cavoukian, expert in residence, leading the Privacy by Design Center of Excellence at Ryerson University. She is, of course, also a former 3-term Information Privacy Commissioner for Ontario.